this week's Top Gear, Quentin Wilson's driving an extremely fast tortoise. Michel Newman's in a French town heaving with electric cars. And Steve Berry's found the 1994 equivalent of a pile of bricks. Italy. More than half the cars on the roads over here are Fiats. They don't just have a stranglehold on the market, they throttled it years ago. But in Britain, it's a completely different story. For every one car that Fiat sells in the UK, Citroen sells two. Short of blackmail and outright bribery, Fiat has tried most things to make us Brits like their cars. This is the latest attempt. It's called the Punto, and it fits between the bottom end of the Uno range and the Tipo. Needless to say, there isn't just one model. You have a choice of a 1.1 litre engine, a 1.2 litre engine. This one here is a 1.4 litre turbo. If you like to give people asthma, there's a diesel, but inside you're protected because the Punto is available with a special filter in the ventilation system that keeps out things like pollen and carcinogenic soot. And quite apart from all the different engines, you've got a choice of 3 or 5 doors and naturally endless different trim levels. But to prove that Top Gear is a programme for the people, we're going to look at the cheapest. It can only reach 93 miles an hour, but at least we won't be put off by the price. The turbo may be £11,000, but this 1.1 litre version is yours for just £6,400. These days, though, there's something that's even more important than value for money. Safety. Fiat has never had a particularly good reputation on that front before, and we've always known that bigger cars are safer than smaller ones. So you'd imagine this was the worst of all possible worlds, a small Fiat. But no, it has side intrusion bars in all the doors, it has seats that were designed by Loughborough University that prevent you from sliding under the belts in the event of an accident, it has seatbelt pre-tensioners, you can even have an airbag. It seems then that even the Italians are now taking safety seriously. If this car was bigger, you'd call it a Volvo. But the trouble is, it's also like a Volvo to drive. The Uno and the Tipo have their faults, but like all Italian cars, they're fun to drive. The Punto, though, sadly isn't. The steering appears to be connected to the front wheels with a series of joints full of yoghurt. But keener drivers need not despair because it does have one little trick up its sleeve. Here's something we've never seen on a town car before. 4th gear, and 5th gear, and 6th gear. Now that should give the Punto some appeal to those people who are graduating to a car from a motorbike. But don't worry, all you old people who simply want something easy to drive. You can have a 5-speed gearbox, or if you wait a few months, an automatic. If you go for the dull gearbox, there's an interior to match, but I just love the electric blue upholstery that I've got in here. Even though the Punto is slightly bigger than the class average, the space in here is remarkable. Even I could wear a hat, and even with the seat pushed fully back, there's space in the back for a couple of grown lads. The price you pay for all this interior space is oddball styling. And in case you were wondering why it looks so unbelievably similar to the new Seat Ibiza, I can tell you, they were both designed by the same man, Giorgetto Giugiaro. Now, Giugiaro did the Mk1 Golf, the Scirocco, he did the Lotus Esprit, the Panda, the Fiat Uno, so his credentials are impeccable. But he also did the Morris Ital, so we do know the man can make mistakes. I'm not saying the Punto is a mistake, but I do believe it's too futuristic for us Brits. The 5-door model looks more weird than the weirdest thing in the world. So, counting against it are looks and, apart from the turbo, driver appeal. but on its side is safety, practicality and value for money. Now that's what the British want for sure, but the trouble is we can already get it from 100 other super minis. The Punto then is as good as the competition, but it's no better.
If you go down to Birmingham's Museum and Art Gallery, home to one of Europe's finest collections of pre-Raphaelite art, you're in for a big surprise. Because as well as an entire gallery devoted to the arts and crafts movement of the 19th century, a smattering of old masters, some very weird objects in glass cabinets, and a collection of ancient Japanese haute couture, there's also the newly refurbished £4 million gas hall, which recently hosted a Canaletto exhibition. And if you go in there, there's bikes. What we have here is a celebration of the tradition, skill and craft of custom bikes. So how and when did this business of customising bikes begin? Well, in this country at least, it can be traced to that post-war period when manufacturers like Triumph, Norton and BSA began offering a new breed of bike that was sexy, fast, but above all affordable, especially if you got it on the newfangled HP. And all of that ultimately led to this, the Triton. The Triton was about as good as cafe racers ever got, and if you were a coffee bar cowboy, then this was your dream ride. It combined Norton's legendary featherbed frame and road holder forks with Triumph's powerful parallel twin engine. The result was a fabulous hybrid, ideally suited to our narrow and winding roads. Meanwhile, over in America, a big country by anyone's standards, things were developing very differently. Their custom bikes reflected the vast distances involved in crossing that continent, and consequently were built for comfort rather than speed. By the late 60s, thanks largely to cult films like Easy Rider, the Americans had set the standard for custom bikes. If you were going to build a chopper, so called because all the unwanted metal was chopped off the original bike, then there was really only one starting point, a V-twin Harley-Davidson. Undeterred by the almost total absence of second-hand Harley-Davidsons, British custom bike builders set to with what was available. Unfortunately, what was available was often totally unsuited to the task, which is how this immensely sad and desperately unstable motorcycle, based on an old Ariel 1000, came into existence. But the Americans were in for a shock, because in the 70s, an Englishman started building fantastically imaginative machines. In 1981, he took a motorcycle he called the Gold Yamaha to America's most prestigious custom bike show, and he won.
When I built that bike, I built two bikes at the same time, and I totally immersed myself in the project for as long as I could do, so 18, 19, 20 hours a day for 3 months. Because if you build something like that, you build it from your soul, and you have to put everything you can into it, and any interruption takes you away from the intensity you need to build it.
You don't sell your bikes at all, do you?
I don't think the people that just got money and haven't got the soul, the same soul that I have, they don't deserve to own them.
But people must ask you all the time, how much is it worth? What do you say to them?
I can't answer their question. I know what it's worth to me. You know, it's worth X% of my life.
Strange as it will undoubtedly seem, this bizarre contraption, dubbed the Fly because of its spindly, insect-like appearance, does have one significant thing in common with that classic cafe racer, the Triton. Because after a couple of decades, largely spent imitating the Americans, we're back to a custom bike style that is innovative, imaginative and uniquely British. You'd expect a custom bike of this quality to belong to someone a bit special. And you'd be right.
I don't want a bike that's like everybody else's. I like to put my mark on my bike. You know, it's a love, it's not just a machine. You get the joy out of creating something that is totally yours. I mean, when it's finished, there is no mistaking that that is your mark, that is your motorcycle.
Well, what do you say to people who are going to say that you're just out for attention?
Get a life.
Of course, the question to come out of all this carry-on is it art? Well, why don't you decide for yourself? The exhibition's on till May. Personally, I couldn't care less as long as it's fun.
This Citroen AX looks like any other hire car you pick up at an airport. That is, until you get inside. As soon as you turn on the ignition, you realise that this isn't a petrol-driven car, but an electric one. You turn on the ignition in the usual way, and all the lights illuminate. When they go out, you turn the ignition again. And you're ready to go. You know you are because the green forward light is illuminated. To go backwards, well, there's no gear stick, but there is a button labelled R, and you press that to go in reverse, and the reversing light flashes off and on. And to go forward, you just press the button again. On the left, normal speedometer. On the right is your energy meter, and that tells you how much power you've got left in your battery. In this case, I've got 80%, so I'm ready to go. In an attempt to combat the growing problem of urban pollution, the French town of La Rochelle has begun a joint experiment with PSA Peugeot Citroen. Electric versions of Peugeot 106s and Citroen AXs will be on trial there until 1995. 25 AXs and 25 186s will be driven over the next 18 months to see how they perform in and about town. If the experiment's successful, Peugeot Citroen are planning 50,000 electric cars to be in production by the year 2000.
We believe that there is a future for electric cars. Of course, we don't think that they will compete with normal cars, but I think there is a market for these cars for use in cities, because there are no pollution, there are silence, not the first car, but the second or the third car of people.
And what about a place like La Rochelle? What are they getting out of this?
Oh, I think they will get no pollution in the town. The children will not breathe the smoke of the cars. I think they will get more silence in the streets.
Now, will you drive one yourself?
Oh yes, and I like it very much.
La Rochelle is not alone. In 1995, the French city of Tours will launch a scheme in which you can hire electric cars for individual journeys using a smart card electronic monitoring system. Nearer to home, Oxford has already got 4 battery-powered buses. And in 1996, Coventry is planning to use electric vehicles as part of the city's transport system. The widespread use of electric cars will mean that driving habits will have to change. It's just like driving an automatic, except that the acceleration is totally progressive because it doesn't have gears, and it is incredibly quiet. Because it's an electric car, you've got an econometer. As you're driving along and the needle goes to the right into the green, you're driving economically. As you accelerate and the needle goes into the red, you're not driving quite so economically. As you decelerate and the needle goes to the left of the zero, you are in fact recharging the battery. So if you can get into the habit of driving as opposed to braking but decelerating, you are actually saving even more energy. In terms of range, well, the Citroen AX and the Peugeot 106 on a fully recharged battery will do about 85 kilometres. That's between 55 and 60 miles. But this isn't quite an all-electric car, because designers found that whatever they did, heating the interior used masses of energy far too quickly. So they resorted to the only solution, a petrol-fired heater. The car is light and easy to handle, and you won't be overtaken by a milk float. But you do find that your eyes are glued to the energy meter, and the needle does seem to move towards the red awfully quickly. La Rochelle is the first city to have installed recharging terminals around the town, where you plug your car in and buy electricity, very much in the way you pay for parking. Recharging isn't difficult, but at times it would have all the attraction of getting the Hoover out. So once all the machinery is in place, it's a case of putting in your charge card, specifying which terminal it is, number one, then saying how long you want, just like a normal parking ticket really, so finish at about, say, 1 o'clock. Press your validation, and you get your parking ticket and the car's on charge. So while your car's on charge, mine's on for about 50 minutes, you could have a cup of coffee or do some shopping. But in fact, I'm going to take the chance to take the electric Peugeot around the block. This isn't all a futuristic dream. In California, by 1998, 2% of all cars must be zero-emission vehicles, which means electric. In Europe, Peugeot Citroen have already invested £70 million in their electric vehicle programme. Both the 106 and the AX are the first cars to be converted. In fact, the Peugeot is very similar to the Citroen, and like the Citroen, it needs charging. But this is a fast recharge point. There are a few of them around the town. This recharge point will deliver, for every minute, 2 kilometres of energy. The battery is made of nickel cadmium, and there's not an awful lot to see because the majority of it is underneath the car. Underneath the bonnet, well, there's only this. Not much for the home mechanic to fiddle with here. Electric cars without batteries will cost the same as diesel versions. In practice, batteries are too expensive to buy, so they'll have to be leased for between £30 and £50 a month. Electric cars need less conventional servicing, and they have the added bonus of being able to be recharged at home overnight using cheap off-peak electricity, which would work out at about £1 per 100 kilometres. The big question is, how long would off-peak rates last if we were all plugging in our electric cars at night?
The occasion, the Autosport International Show at the NEC in January. A glittering array of racing cars and rally cars, past and present. A place where the fans can get close and dream of driving machines that they can probably never afford. There were Grand Prix cars large and small. A mighty racer from the States, complete with V8 power.
Forget about Nigel Mansell and IndyCar racing. This is the heart of American motorsport. NASCAR. Great big Chevrolets, Fords and Pontiacs dicing at over 200 miles an hour around the banked circuits of America. This is a Pontiac, a very famous number 43, used by the King, Richard Petty, for 27 years. Now, Petty retired at the end of 1992. But where do the new stars of NASCAR learn their trade? Well, there's a new formula in America, a junior formula. It's very popular, and it's coming here this year.
Now then, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to see a new car to British shores. It's going to be competing in its own racing challenge on our small oval circuits in 1994. It's built to 5/8 scale. It's called the Legend. Made in America, this really is a very dramatic little car indeed.
And I was to put it through its paces in the indoor arena extravaganza.
Well, I've got no light in here. I can't see where I'm going. This is driving under the spotlight.
To add to my problems, they'd added a bit of smoke for effect, but I was having a ball. Ballroom dancing American style, with precious little grip on the shiny indoor surface. Conditions were ideal to demonstrate a bit of balanced throttle control, with a pirouette for a finale.
Now, Noise, indoors, spotlights, opposite lock, power. That's what I call fun. Now, the beauty of this legend is part its simplicity. Power comes from an air-cooled 1200cc Yamaha motorbike engine. They've mounted the four-cylinder engine in line as opposed to transverse, then converted the chain drive to a shaft drive to send the 120-plus horsepower to the rear wheels.
Drive is through a standard Yamaha 5-speed sequential gearbox to a locked differential at the rear, so both wheels will spin at the same time when traction is broken.
Well, that's a brief look at the legends. We're going to see more of them later this year when they start racing, but for now, I've got to go back indoors and have a bit of fun.
Body shapes are based on pre-war American classics. This is a 37 Chevy Coupe, but when the legends come to Europe, expect Morris Thousands, Ford Pops, VW Beetles, or even a De Chevaux.
In 1960, this was the most electrifying machine that the Autocar magazine had ever tested. Designed by Bertoni in Italy, but built in an aircraft hangar in Southampton, it boasted knuckle-whitening performance, matinee-idle good looks, and a thundering 5.4-litre, 300 brake horsepower Chevrolet Corvette engine. It was called the Gordon Keeble and was the only car ever to sport a tortoise as its bonnet badge. But the company has long since been wound up. Despite a queue of excitable buyers, plenty of favourable publicity, and clientele as glamorous as Jackie Kennedy and Diana Dawes, the Gordon Keeble was a commercial catastrophe with just 104 cars built. So how could anything so bewitchingly handsome not sell like the elixir of youth? Just why did it fail?
The main reason was the three-day week at the time. All the engineering strikes. We had a full order book with 300 cars. We had the Cray twins tried to jump the queue on some of the early cars, and we couldn't get the supplies we wanted to make them, and eventually we ran out of money. It was underpriced. I mean, we sold it for £3,000, and we could have easily have sold it for £4,000. It was cheap against the Aston Martin, which it competed with. It more or less put the Jensen CV8 out of business. And Jensen's produced the Interceptor to give us a bit of competition also.
But it was neither something dreamt up in a lukewarm bath nor a 10-bob lash-up. They really were assiduously assembled and meticulously made. The car built to aircraft standards, read the advertising copy. Rhetoric that's proved true because the GK seems to have stood the test of time. A space frame chassis, that unsmashable V8 engine and a fiberglass body have meant that over 90 of these gorgeous Gordons have survived, with 60 still in regular use.
This car is chassis number 3. And it's a car that I worked on many years ago as a young lad. Having worked with Jim Keeble on the birth of the prototype in '59, I assisted cutting up the first 5 sets of chassis tubes, making the first 5 sets of bracketry all over the car. And when the opportunity came up to buy the car, it was history repeating itself, and my partner and I set off to restore the car into the splendour that it is of today.
And anyone who had a heart couldn't resist the Keeble's good vibrations. And these Flash Gordons have all the right qualifications. Mile-swallowing performance, 4 seats, handsome European good looks, and bags of style. So much so, in fact, that you're determined to fall in love with the thing.
before you even so much as open the door. Inside, it's like the flight deck of an old Dakota. Lots of quilted PVC, fire extinguisher, black on white gauges, toggle switches. But I've got to read you a line from the handbook. In 1960, an automatic choke was a big deal, so the Gordon Keeble owner is told, don't start up a cold engine and then leave it idling while you rush indoors to pay a belated farewell to your wife. They certainly don't write them like that anymore. And Gordon Bennett is it fast. First gear takes you to 70, second gear to 90, third gear to 103, and fourth gear is a maximum speed of 145 miles an hour. I'm here to tell you that the Gordon Keeble is a bit of all right. Trouble is, absolute power corrupts absolutely, and you need to constantly remind yourself that this is a hugely powerful old car on joke tyres that won't hesitate to bite you if you try anything fresh. Whoops. But because it's so powerfully pretty, you can forgive it the odd period foible. For a 34-year-old design, it's perfectly timeless. There's not a sweep or curve out of place, from the slanted headlights to the rakishly angled wheel arches. So what on earth possessed them to stick a tortoise on the bonnet?
We were actually taking some publicity photographs, and across the road walked a tortoise, which I picked up and put on the wing of the car, and it promptly did a naughty, and this stripped the whole streak of paint off the wing, and hence the tortoise badge.
Some reckon it was an ill-fated mascot that brought the project nothing but bad luck.
The Gordon Keeble was the product of a golden age where beauty mattered more than balance sheets. It failed for two very simple reasons. A, the workers couldn't make enough of them, and B, the management forgot to put a profit margin in the price.
Oh, how the British motor industry has changed.
Next week, we're off to Geneva to see the motor industry's latest goodies. We're looking at a jolly sensible sort of second-hand car. And we're asking whether the hot hatch is dead, alive, or in limbo.